Everybody I know in Texas that's black tells me, do not go. And they say, dude, you might want to get up out of here as soon as possible. We're at sundown. You want to leave here now.
Sundown towns are communities where Black Americans are explicitly unwelcome after sunset. These towns enforce their exclusion through intimidation, violence, and policies that discourage or outright prohibited Black residency. While the 13th Amendment may have abolished slavery in the United States, loopholes paired with systemic policies like Jim Crow laws led the civil rights movement of the 1960s, which sought to dismantle segregation and advance equal rights to all. Yet, more than half a century later, the scars of systemic racism persist, manifesting in various forms, including the troubling legacy of sundown towns. While some sundown towns no longer maintain official exclusionary practices, their histories leave a lasting impact on the racial makeup and culture of these areas. We are turning our attention to some cities where the sun never really set. Forsyth County, Georgia has a legacy of racial expulsion. Including present day, this town made recent headlines after an investigation revealed a hostile environment was created when the public school system banned and censored only certain books. Yes, in the 2020s, but more on that in a minute. Forsyth County, Georgia became infamous in 1912 when white mobs violently expelled its Black residents following allegations of crimes against white women. Over 1,000 Black residents were forced to flee their homes, leaving behind their property, livelihoods, and communities. This violent expulsion marked the beginning of a century of racial exclusion in Forsyth County. By the mid-20th century, the county was virtually all white, and it remained that way for decades. A few attempts at reintegration were met with resistance and hostility, including protests in the 1980s when civil rights activists attempted to hold marches in the area. Today, Forsyth County is more diverse, but the scars of its violent past still haunt its identity. Memorials and public acknowledgments of the county's history have been sparse, and debates over how to teach that history remain contentious. Back to the recent news headlines, there were huge issues for the city's racist undertones in K-12 classrooms. The U.S. Department of Education made Forsyth County upper schools actually collect data on racial harassment. This came after an investigation into the district's book ban that may have created a hostile environment for some students. The investigation revealed that many of the censored banned books were about the Black experience. So in this case, the town is still waiting for the sun to set on its sundown legacy.
I see trailer parks. I see a bunch of Confederate flags. I saw a doll of a black man. It was just a doll wrapped in a Confederate flag hanging from a tree by its neck. That's the type of stuff I saw in Vidor, Texas.
Vidor, Texas is an infamous sundown town with a long casting shadow. Even today, people of color discuss avoiding Vidor at all costs as it's right off the interstate during road trips in Texas. Why? Vidor gained notoriety in the 20th century as a sundown town with their signs warning Black individuals to leave before nightfall, which served as a stark reminder of the town's exclusionary practices. Yes, this city used to literally have signs up to tell Black individuals to leave before nightfall. This reputation was further cemented by local acts of intimidation and violence designed to keep Black families out. Even as the civil rights movement made strides nationwide, Vidor resisted integration and its population remained overwhelmingly white for decades. In the 1990s, Vidor was a haven for the KKK. In 2022, the town was thrust back into the spotlight when a Black truck driver, Gideon, that you saw earlier, spent the night in Vidor and posted about his experience. He was shocked when his GPS took him to the exit of the notoriously racist town. When Gideon got to his truck loading site in Vidor, he heard a security guard alerting coworkers to a code red.
Hey, we got a code red.
The security in the area did not want to be responsible for Gideon's safety. As his truck was being unloaded, one man warned Gideon to leave and keep driving and not stop until he reached Beaumont. When Gideon asked about the police, the man just said, "Police turn a blind eye." It is insane to think this happened such a short time ago, still in the 2020s. Known to many as the most racist town in America, Harrison, Arkansas is a town struggling for redemption. Harrison has long been associated with white supremacist organizations, including the Ku Klux Klan. The presence of these groups has cast a long shadow over the town, deterring diversity and perpetuating a reputation for hostility toward Black residents.
Have a little pride in the race, brother! White pride worldwide!
Harrison's history is marked by incidents of violence and intimidation that reinforced its status as a sundown town well into the 20th century. You might be thinking that the KKK's residency in Harrison is a thing of the past, or that it has since cleaned up its problems. But as recently as October 2024, Harrison once again won the title of Most Racist Town in America. Grand Rapids native and filmmaker Rob Bliss went viral in 2020 when he held up a Black Lives Matter sign in, you guessed it, the most racist town in America. He stood with his sign in Harrison and was met with the N-word, various other slurs, accusations of being a Marxist, and actually, many people screamed back, White Lives Matter. It's proof that the town's twilight is still yet to come. Anna, Illinois is a town with a chilling acronym. The town of Anna is often associated with an unofficial acronym. Ain't no, you guessed it, which N-word allowed. This phrase, while shocking, reflects the historical reality of Black exclusion in the town. Anna's reputation as a sundown town was enforced through intimidation and systemic policies that discouraged Black residency. For decades, Black travelers and residents understood that Anna was a place to avoid after dark. Today, Anna's demographic makeup remains overwhelmingly white, raising questions about the long-term effects of its exclusionary past. The cultural and economic barriers that maintain segregation remain significant in Anna. While many white people would argue that the Anna acronym is in the past, the same cannot be argued by the town's Black residents. Conversations about the town's history and future are slowly beginning, driven by younger generations and community advocates seeking to address its legacy, including hosting a Black Lives Matter protest. Elwood, Indiana is a town resistant to change. To be fair, the entire state of Indiana, which was founded in 1851, had a state constitution that banned people of color from settling there. Elwood, in particular, was once known as a place where Black individuals were explicitly unwelcome. Reports of violent incidents and community efforts to maintain racial uniformity persisted well into the 20th century. Elwood's reputation as a sundown town was not merely anecdotal, it was a reality enforced by both individuals and institutions. In recent years, some residents have taken steps to address this history, including holding public forums and educational events aimed at fostering inclusivity. However, progress has been slow and resistance to change remains strong in some quarters. Elwood's story highlights the challenges of transforming deeply ingrained attitudes and rebuilding trust within communities. But one Black resident said, Elwood is still very racially segregated. The Black people live with caution, the Hispanics live with ignorance, and I have yet to see an Asian family live here. I have also been told that there are about 150 active Klan members within city limits. With a long history of hostility, Cicero, Illinois gained national attention in the 1950s for a violent riot when a Black family attempted to move into a predominantly white neighborhood. The ensuing violence, which included the destruction of property and physical attacks, underscored the depth of resistance to integration in the town. Cicero's history of segregation and hostility toward Black residents persisted well into the late 20th century. Unfortunately, the town's sundown past isn't exclusively in the past. In July of 2020, Black residents of Cicero reacted to looting and the destruction of Black-owned businesses. Many Black-owned businesses in the town were ransacked, leaving 2 people dead and 60 people arrested. Many residents believe this was a backlash of the recent BLM protest in the area. Residents were advised to stay indoors and curfews, yes, literal curfews, were put in place to avoid vigilante responses. This only fostered more tension between Black residents and law enforcement. Regardless of your race, putting yourself in another one's shoes can be helpful, and in this instance, I definitely see how tensions were boiling over as the city issued curfews requiring grown adults to stay inside after dark, especially considering the town's history. Corbin, Kentucky is a small town of only 7,800 people just north of the Tennessee border, about an hour and a half south of Lexington, Kentucky. Kentucky, as a state, has never had the greatest reputation when it comes to racism. But Corbin takes it to the next level. It's 97% white, and that is by design. In 1919, white residents rioted and forced the town's 200 black families onto a train and out of town. It continued with a legacy as a sundown town where black residents were intimidated into staying inside after dark. The town is still considered by many as a sundown town in modern day. Corbin, Kentucky continues making headlines as recently as 2023, when the police in Corbin were looking into reports of racist flyers being spread throughout town. The notes were believed to be directly from the KKK, and it had the residents left unsettled. Can you imagine just minding your own business, leaving the grocery store to find some hate-filled flyer on your car window? Oh, and you're told it's from the KKK? Do better, Kentucky. Now we're going way up north to Darien, Connecticut. Most people don't think of pairing the North with racism, but this is a town of hidden exclusivity. Though less common in New England, Darien was an actual sundown town. However, unlike many towns on this list, Darien, Connecticut lacks the overt violence associated with sundown towns. How so? This city's history of exclusion is tied to wealth and zoning laws that effectively barred black families from settling in the community. Restrictive covenants and unspoken cultural norms maintained Darien's racial uniformity for much of the 20th century. Today, the town's demographics still reflect the exclusionary practices, raising questions about economic and racial equity. While some residents and leaders have called for greater inclusivity and affordable housing initiatives, these efforts have faced resistance. Darien's story highlights the subtle but pervasive ways systemic racism can shape communities. In 2021, police were tasked with investigating overt acts of racism at Darien High School, including graffiti and social media messages. The school superintendent said the incidents were, quote, very disturbing and unacceptable. Believe it or not, even California has its share of sundown towns, and Fresno, California is no exception. Many of us think about California as a utopia for diversity, but with that diversity comes subtle, or in this case, not so subtle racism. Fresno is truly a tale of two cities, white Fresno and non-white Fresno. The differences are stark, and many cite its sundown legacy as the reason for the government's neglect of its so-called black part of town. The west side has been neglected with pothole-ridden roads, overflowing landfills, and schools unable to meet the needs of its children. One Fresno resident shared that she was actually called racial slurs by her white teachers, who made it clear that West Fresno was not their choice place to be. More than half of West Fresno lives below the poverty line, compared to only 27% of the rest of the city. A simple internet search will reveal a city fraught with racial violence, accusations of racism among the school boards, and government neglect in its neighborhoods predominantly made up by people of color. This residential segregation is no accident either. It was by design. Kenilworth, Illinois made this list with its quiet segregation. Kenilworth is one of the wealthiest suburbs in the United States. While its exclusivity is primarily enforced through economic barriers, its lack of diversity speaks to a history of policies and practices that have excluded black residents. Restrictive zoning laws, high property values, and unspoken social norms have maintained Kenilworth's racial uniformity for generations. Today, Kenilworth's demographic makeup serves as a stark reminder of how systemic racism can manifest in less overt ways. One of the most obvious remnants of this racist town is the Joseph Sears School. While the name may sound innocent or remind most people of the 80s era department store, what most people don't realize is that Joseph Sears had a pretty strong stance about race. The school's makeup is 90% white, and that is largely because of Joseph Sears and his policy of selling land to Caucasians only. And in his world, Caucasians did not include Jewish people. So while the town may seem like the sun has set on the 20th century, schools with names like Joseph Sears continue to be a reminder of the past. Let me know in the comments if you know of any other cities that should have made this list, and make sure to check out this video that has a breakdown of the top cities that Black Americans are leaving.